What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Zero Lab. Today, we're taking a look at the top 5 decks from Space-Time Smackdown here in Pokémon TCG Pocket. The new set came out this week, and there's a ton of cool cards included in the set for deck building. A bunch of great new item cards, supporters, and Pokemon that I think are adding a ton of variety to deck building in the game, and we're seeing a big shakeup in the meta already. So we're going to take a look at the top 5 decks from Space-Time Smackdown and go over some deck lists and talk about my thoughts on them. But yeah, I'm very excited for this format. We also did just get news that the next mini set comes out on February 28th. I believe that's Pokemon Day. So that's pretty cool. That's exactly 4 weeks from now, pretty much. So very, very excited about that. It's great that they're continuing to bring content to the game to keep things new and exciting. But we're going to jump right into this with number 5. This deck may look a little bit familiar. It's Pikachu EX, but we have a great new attacker in the deck and some great new item cards and supporter cards in here with this Pachirisu EX. So the new cards in here are the Pachirisu EX has 120 HP and the Sparking Gadget attack for 2 lightning energy. Same amount of energy as Pikachu EX's attack takes, but it does 40 plus 40 more damage if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached to it. So 10 less damage than Pikachu EX. However, we can attach a giant cape to it, which would give Pachirisu 20 more HP, make it a little bit tankier, or we can provide it with the Rocky Helmet, which says when your opponent attacks into it, you do 20 damage back to them, which basically makes our Sparking Gadget attack essentially be doing about 100 damage, so technically 10 damage more than Pikachu EX when they hit into the Rocky Helmet. There's also some really cool things you can do with the new supporters in here. So we have the new Cyrus, where you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active spot. So Pikachu and Pachirisu are both very good at two-shotting big threats in the game because they just put out really good, consistent 80 to 90 damage output on them for just 2 lightning energy. So we would guess that our opponents are probably going to retreat out of Pokemon and go up and attack with something else, so we're not just two-shotting everything. And Cyrus can help us bring those Pokemon back up. We also have the Dawn supporter. The Dawn moves an energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon, so it's a great way later in the game to power up your Zapdos EX, where we've got Pachirisu or Pikachu swinging, and then we can be attaching for turn onto the Zapdos and then use X speed, retreat out of the Pachirisu or Pikachu, move an energy from them to the Zapdos, and use that Thundering Hurricane attack. We talked about the Giant Cape and the Rocky Helmet, but those I think are just both great tools for this deck. We also have the Rotom in here with the Assault Laser attack that does 20 damage, and I believe it does 30 more damage if a tool card is attached. I'm now that's a little bit blocked by the number, but yeah, I think it's 20 plus 30 more, so it can do 50 for 1 if it's got a tool attached. So I think this deck is really cool, and this is probably the best way to play Pikachu EX now in this format. Pikachu EX kind of got bullied out of the format by some better decks once we got to Mythical Island. It was still pretty good, but Mewtwo EX getting better meant that it was sort of getting bullied out of the format because it didn't have a great way to deal with a Mewtwo EX. That was just one-shotting the Pikachus. But I think this is the best way to play Pikachu EX with Pachirisu EX now. These new supporters and new tools provide a lot for the deck. So that's number 5 here. Moving on to number 4, we have a Charizard EX. And I think this deck gets a whole lot better with the new cards from Space-Time Smackdown. So a couple of things that we now have. We have well, let's go over the Pokemon first. It's just a normal 2-2-2 line of Charizard EX and 2 Moltres EX. If you don't know what the deck does, Moltres EX has the Inferno Dance attack for 1 fire energy. You flip 3 coins and take an amount of fire energy equal to the number of heads and attach them to your benched fire Pokemon. So we power up our Charmanders, Charmeleons, Charizards with this Moltres EX, and then we start swinging with the Charizard EX. Very difficult to OHKO a Charizard EX in the game. Has 180 HP. Have up to 200 HP if we put a giant cape on it, obviously. And then it does Crimson Storm. It does 200 damage, and you discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon. So you're one-hit KOing anything in the game without being able to get really one-hit KO'd in return by much of anything other than another Charizard EX. So we also have the new Dawn supporter in here. Obviously, we can retreat out of the Moltres EX and just like move energy from our bench Pokemon to our active Pokemon and just like get that Charizard more powered up. Lots of things you can do with it. Or if you just flip a ton of heads on the Moltres, you can go into the Moltres' second attack as well by utilizing a Dawn to move the energy you attach to the bench back up onto the Moltres EX. But a big thing that this deck gains from the new set is Pokemon communication, a great way to start finding our evolutions. Stage 2 decks often have the issue of finding those evolutions at the right time to begin evolving. And so utilizing Pokemon communication to find our Charmeleons and Charizard EXs more quickly is going to make this deck a lot more consistent. I think this deck gets a lot better with Pokemon communication. I think there's even an argument probably to like cut down to 1 Dawn and play 2 Pokemon communication, and maybe even an argument for another Giant Cape potentially, just to make these guys a little bit tankier. It's good to make the Moltres tankier as well. But yeah, I do think 2 Pokemon communication probably is something you want to play in the list. You could cut down to 1 Leaf, go to 2x speed, 1 Dawn, and 2 Pokemon communication potentially. But it really depends on what you want to do. Maybe 1 Pokemon communication is enough. But I do think this deck gets a lot better in this format. One of the things that you have to worry about, though, is Palkia being very good. And water types in general being better because of the new Manaphy. The nice thing is your Moltres EX is not weak to water. It is weak to lightning, but your Charizard is weak to water. But it does have enough HP with the Giant Cape that you don't really have to worry about it too much. So Charizard EX, I think a big winner from this set. And I think if more people start playing the deck, I think we'll see better results online. I think it's just a matter of people picking it up. And I'm excited to make a video about this deck and play more games with it because I do think that this deck is stronger than people are giving it credit for with the inclusion of that Pokemon communication. Moving on to number 3, this is a deck that a ton of people are excited about. It is the Weavile EX with Darkrai EX. I think these are 2 of the best EXs that come out of this set. They work really well together. So we have a 2/2 Weavile EX line in here. The Weavile has the Scratching Nails attack. For 1 Dark Energy, does 30 plus 40 more damage if your opponent's active Pokemon already has damage on it. And then the Darkrai EX has the Nightmare Aura ability. Whenever you attach a Dark Energy from your Energy Zone to this Pokemon, do 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So we can use that Darkrai EX's ability to get the damage counters on our opponent's active Pokemon to do extra damage with that Scratching Nails attack. And obviously with the Dawn supporter, even if we haven't attached an energy to the Weavile EX yet, we can attach an energy to the Darkrai EX, get that effect of the ability, and then move that energy from the Darkrai to our active Weavile EX with the Dawn. Then we also have Spiritomb, just for 1 colorless energy. It has the Swirling Disaster attack. 80 HP on a basic is pretty good as well. This attack does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. So setting up damage on all of our opponent's Pokemon, so the Scratching Nails attack is doing that 70 damage to everything, is just a really good way to start the game. It also unlocks our Cyrus supporter, the new Cyrus supporter from the set. Switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active spot. So Spiritomb does damage to everything, and then that unlocks our Cyrus supporters to target down anything that we want. There are 2 Pokeballs and 1 Pokemon communication in here, and then 2 Rocky Helmet. Again, a great way to make sure we're getting damage onto our opponent's active Pokemon. 70 damage isn't the most damage output, in the world. So supplementing that with the Nightmare Aura ability plus the Rocky Helmet can really help us get over the damage thresholds that we need to. So I think this deck is very good, and I think it's probably the most hyped deck out of the set, or one of the most hyped decks. I think people really like Pokemon Darkrai in particular, so I think this is a really cool deck. I do expect this to not be the best deck ultimately. Just playing some games with it sometimes can struggle, but I do think this is one of the best new decks out of the set, and yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. Moving on to number 2, we're featuring the Darkrai EX again, but I think this is probably actually a better way to build it than the Weavile. With the new Magnezone from the set, this new Magnezone has 140 HP, and the Thunder Blast attack for Lightning and 2 colorless, it does 110, and then you discard a Lightning energy from this Pokemon. You might be wondering, how do we get the Lightning energy onto this Pokemon? Well, we have the Magneton from Genetic Apex. With the Volt Charge ability, once during your turn, you may take a Lightning energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to this Pokemon. So we're not playing any Lightning in our Energy Zone. We're just playing Dark Energy in this deck. But the Volt Charge gets our lightning energy to attach to the Magneton, and then we can evolve up into the Magnezone. So we're really just trying to start out the game by tanking hits with the Dredagon, with that Rough Skin ability that does 20 damage to the attacking Pokemon, and then supplementing more damage with the Nightmare Aura ability on the Darkrai EX, and then powering up our Magnezones in the back line with the Volt Charge on the Magnetons, then eventually evolving up into the Magnezones and doing 110 damage, maybe even 130 damage when we use the Nightmare Aura ability for turn onto the active Pokemon, and then use Thunder Blast. Rounding out the list, we have 2 Professor's Research, a Sabrina, a Cyrus, 1 Leaf, 2 Pokeball, a Pokemon Communication, and then 2 Giant Capes. I think there's an argument for 2 Leaf because we really want to start the Dredagon. And so if we start Darkrai or Magnemite, we really just want to retreat out into Dredagon early. So I think there's probably an argument to maybe just cut the Sabrina and just play 2 Leaf. And then the Giant Capes are really good. They make our Dreadagons a little bit more tanky. Magnezone having 160 and Darkrai having 160. That's a very good HP. I do think there's a world where you could consider playing the Rocky Helmet as well and putting those on your Dredagon so that Rough Skin plus Rocky Helmet is doing 40 damage to any attacking Pokemon. 40 damage in return to an attack really would make your opponent thinking, second guess attacking if they're not taking a knockout. For example, if you're playing against let's say a Pikachu EX deck and they do 90 to your Dredagon and do 40 in return, by the time they're KOing your Dredagon, if you have the Rocky Helmet on it, you've done 80 damage back to them. And that's pretty rough for them, especially combining that with Nightmare Aura. You could just basically knock them out without attacking between those 2 abilities plus the Rocky Helmet. So maybe you go 1 Cape, 1 Rocky Helmet split. Maybe the Capes are just better, but the Rocky Helmet seems like it pairs really, really well with the Dredagon. So moving on, we have a couple of honorable mentions. There's a couple of other decks that I'd like to talk about here. One of them being Executor EX with Celebi EX and the new Shaman. This, I think this deck is very, very underrated. The Shaman has the Fragrant Flower Garden ability. Once during your turn, you may heal 10 damage from each of your Pokemon, and that stacks. So if you have 2 Shaman in play, you can use that twice, healing 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. Combine that with Erica and Potions, and you're tanking a ton of damage with the Executor EX. In this list, there is the Rocky Helmet to increase your damage output a little bit. Obviously, Tropical Swing does 40 to 80, depending on whether you flip heads or tails on the Executor EX. So when your opponent hits into you and you do 20 damage to them, that's pretty nice. I do think there's also an argument to play Giant Capes in this deck. Just make your Executor even more tanky, and then combine that with the Fragrant Flower Garden ability, Potions, and Ericas, and I think that's pretty sick. So you just tank with the Executor for a few turns while you're powering up a Celebi EX in the back line, and then the Celebi EX can basically sweep anything as long as you flip enough heads. So I think this deck is very, very underrated, and I'm excited to see if it can do well in some of the online tournaments this weekend. Another honorable mention is Dialga EX. There's a bunch of ways to play Dialga EX. You can play it with the Regigigas in the new set. You can play it with the Heatran. You could play it with Melmetal. But I really like the Licky Licky EX. This deck does have a few problems that we'll go over. But basically, the Dialga EX has the Metallic Turbo attack for 2 Metal Energy, and it does 30 damage. Then you take 2 Metal Energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. And then the Licky Licky EX has 160 HP, 180 HP if you put a Giant Cape on it. And it has the Licking Fury attack that does 100, and then you flip a coin until you get tails, and you do 40 more damage for each head. So if you flip heads, you're doing 140. It's a really tanky Pokemon. And you can do some really crazy damage output with it. I think one of the problems this deck has is you just really, really have to start Dialga EX. So you got to play 2 Leaf in here. And if you don't, it can be hard sometimes if you're not, starting that Dialga EX, because you then need to attach to Dialga EX, find your Leaf, retreat into the Dialga EX, and you really got to use the Metallic Turbo attack to power this deck up. But I do think there's a lot of different ways you can play Dialga EX. This is just my favorite way because I think Licky Licky EX is cool. But I think the Melmetal is also obviously cool. The Heatran is obviously also cool. And there's a bunch of other things that you could just power up with Dialga EX. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this, and I think I just wanted to make this an honorable mention because I think Dialga EX in some form is one of the top decks coming out of this set. I think it remains to be seen which version is the best, but Dialga EX is obviously very strong. Then finally, we get to the best deck, and I think it is obviously Palkia EX, the best new deck coming out of Space-Time Smackdown. We have the Manaphy with Oceanic Gift Attack. For 1 water energy, you choose 2 of your bench Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, you take water energy from your energy zone and attach it to that Pokemon. We combine that with the Vaporeon with the Washout ability, where as often as you like during your turn, you may move a water energy from one of your bench water Pokemon to your active water Pokemon. That allows us to power up, in conjunction with Misty, our Palkia EX super fast, tank a bunch of hits with Giant Cape, giving our Palkia EX 170 HP, and using that Dimensional Storm attack for 150 damage. You have to discard 3 water energy from this Pokemon, but then you also do 20 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And once your opponent's bench Pokemon have damage on them, we can target them down with Cyrus. And I think this deck is just super strong. And I think, obviously, the best new deck from Space-Time Smackdown. There's another version of the deck where you're kind of playing without the Vaporeon. You just play Starmie EX as well. Use the Manaphy early, attach for turns onto the Palkia EXs and Misties. Eventually, you get there. But I think the Vaporeon washout ability is also a great way to play it. So there's kind of 2 different versions of the deck, but I think they're actually both very good. So Palkia EX, the best new deck from Space-Time Smackdown. That is all the decks we had to go over today, but keep, stay tuned to our channel. We're going to be making a bunch of videos with all of these decks on the channel. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And a reminder that we are running a giveaway for a Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer box. If we hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of February, we're going to be giving away one of those Prismatic Evolutions ETBs. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And we'll see you guys in the next video.